What if I told you that sometimes love isn't loud? It isn't fireworks. It isn't even a sudden collision. What if love is the quiet instinct your eyes obey before your mind has caught up? What if love is the way in every crowded room, every humming lobby, every street-turned river of strangers? Her gaze slips its leash and begins searching, not hunting, not hungry, not restless, but certain, searching for the one presence that turns chaos into map, noise into music, strangers into backdrop, searching for you. It happens without rehearsal, without decision. Conversations float like lanterns, faces glow in borrowed evening light. The air is thick with movement, yet through it all, her eyes work with the patience of a cartographer, tracing corners the way sailors trace stars. She has always been capable. Long before you, she knew how to walk into a room and hold her own. But competence is not orientation. Competence keeps you standing. Orientation reminds you where home is, and home to her is the direction your presence provides. When you are near, her breath expands in a way it had not realized it was rationing. The noise that once sounded like chaos sorts itself into rhythm. Her body tilts imperceptibly toward the space you occupy, and in that leaning, she discovers a truth she cannot unlearn. Leaning toward you feels like belonging, even across the room. Your posture carries meaning. You do not scatter your presence. You are not rehearsing your angles. You stand the way a tree stands when wind has taught it both bending and endurance. Her nervous system, recognizing that stance, bows in gratitude. The crowd around her does not vanish. It simply recedes into scenery, while the play unfolds around its true center. She does not rush, because haste is unnecessary when direction is certain. The way a child drifts steadily toward a parent's voice in a park without sprinting. The way old friends find one another in a throng without cutting corridors. Her steps follow the geometry of belonging, and when you speak to others, she watches as if studying craft. The way you shift attention toward the quietest voice, the way your laughter serves as hospitality, not conquest, the way you nod, not to win points, but to build bridges of understanding. She feels no jealousy, because jealousy cannot survive in your atmosphere. Scarcity dissolves where you stand, and on nights when you are late, when delays, obligations, or weather rewrites schedules, the old reflex revives. Scan, sort, perform. But something has changed. Even your absence organizes the room more than most people's presence. She chooses the seat you would choose, orders the drink you would have wanted, places herself where light and entry both remain in sight. Her eyes still move, but not like a lost thing searching. They move like a scout already certain of return. And when you finally appear, the world tilts back into alignment, as though the axis of the evening corrects itself. Even in transit, the instinct persists. Train platforms, airport gates, crosswalks in the rain, they all blur with rushing coats and footsteps. She looks once, twice, and the third time is not checking, but savoring. Then she finds it. The shape of your jaw, the cadence of your stride, the way your hand shields whatever it carries, whether fragile or ordinary. And in that moment, chaos retreats to the edges of her awareness. Her searching is not confession of need. It is proof of joy. She has survived long enough to know vigilance. She has endured long enough to make scanning for danger muscle memory. But this scanning for you, is something else. It is freedom. It is permission to orient her body toward delight instead of dread. Even fluorescent supermarkets shift when your reflection joins her in a freezer door. Even laundromats hum differently when your shadow interrupts the window. Even the post office, that secular purgatory, is softened by the remembered cadence of your voice, telling her to breathe. And when your actual voice arrives, late but grinning, the ordinary becomes sacrament. She is surrounded by people who love her. She is supported by friends who hold her history, but they are not the ones she searches for in a crowd. And this difference teaches her something inexhaustible. Friends stabilize the past. You stabilize the horizon. Her eyes don't ask, "What have we done?" They ask, "What will we do?" That promise is the thrill. It would be tempting to call this spell work, but you have never performed sorcery. You are not loud, not flashing, not accompanied by spotlight. The only magic here is coherence. You know where you are going, and that makes you easy to find. Even when the crowd hides you, patience radiates through. She notices the way you wait, the way you step aside without applause, the way you treat children as naturally intelligent and elders as countries worth entering with humility. Instinct, baptized by pattern, becomes trust, and in tense rooms, her surge sharpens. She does not need saving. She needs a second center. She finds you, and arguments loosen because you refuse to feed provocation. She finds you, and jokes turn kinder because your laughter refuses cruelty. She finds you, and arrogance grows quieter because your stillness is a mirror where excess looks foolish. In these moments, her gaze is not only romantic, it is strategic. It is survival finding its anchor in steadiness. Even when distance separates you, she asks herself silently, "Where would you stand if you were here?" Near a window for light, slightly off-center to see everything, a step back to make space for the timid. It is not superstition. It is architecture borrowed from memory. Her eyes may not find your face, but they find your way, and in that practice, she becomes what she seeks, an anchor for others. The loop continues. You have trained one another by repetition, by gentleness, by presence. There will be a day when she enters a room and realizes she is not scanned, because everything already feels arranged by your pattern. The glass is poured, the air softened, the tone made honest. She will smile, recognizing love's strange trick of turning orientation into home. Still, when you do arrive, her eyes will always find you, not because they must, but because they can. Recognition is the soul's first language, and with you, the word it speaks is always yes. You are music, but not the anthem demanding fists. You are melody woven into ordinary things. Steam rising from a kettle reminds her of the way you savor syllables. The clink of a spoon recalls your quiet rituals. A laugh bursts out of her alone, proof that the song you left in her belongs to her now. The tune follows her through work, guiding her hand toward clarity, her pace toward balance, her evening reflections away from judgment and toward truth. Even grief cannot silence it. It changes key, slows, and makes space for sorrow to speak. Desire finds rhythm in it too, learning patience, learning courage, learning to voice both yes and no without apology. The song of you does not make her dependent. It makes her dependable. It does not erase independence. It fortifies it. She sometimes resists the melody, trying to prove her separateness, but she learns that not thinking of you is harder work than letting the music play. Resistance costs more than surrender, and surrender feels indistinguishable from wisdom. So she will keep scanning, but no longer like prey watching shadows. Now she scans like a soul, orienting itself to joy. And when her eyes find you across the room, across the station, across the years, it is not obligation, it is freedom. It is the oldest word in the oldest language her heart has ever spoken. And that word, every time, is yes. In a world that mistakes noise for passion, what you bring is rare choreography. You are not volume. You are rhythm. You are not theater. You are truth. There are mornings when your presence is the melody she wakes to, not the sharp alarm that drags her body into fear, but the soft call that makes waking feel like an extension of rest. She ties her shoes and remembers how you once turned laces into a meditation on readiness. She smooths her sheets because of that joke you made about nations collapsing where beds are unmade. She laughed then, but now she repeats it to herself as a kind of prayer. It is not about fabric. It is about living in a space that deserves respect. Your presence blesses the ordinary. It makes a Tuesday holy. And if days go by without hearing from you, she does not unravel. Your steadiness is not fragile. It endures silence, like a well endures winter. What repeats in her is not just you, but the woman she becomes with you. Softer, truer, quicker to laugh, slower to retreat. Her devotion is not to a man alone, but to the way of being your presence makes possible. When you return, the room shifts. The melody does not change its nature, only its depth. You in her memory, and you in her sight align into harmony. She does not confess the way her mind hums with you like music. That truth would be too small in words. Instead, she hands you a glass because you look thirsty, asks about your day because you looked heavy, teases you because love is not blind, it is awake. And later, when the house grows quiet, she lies still a little longer. The silence is not empty, it is resonance. The way you look is not taking but giving. Your eyes do not strip, they bestow. They do not measure like guards, they receive like hosts. A woman whose body is always negotiating safety feels the difference instantly. Something in her nervous system loosens. Here, she can expand. Your gaze cuts through static like a lighthouse. You do not glare. You glow. What she feels first is relief. She does not have to shrink. She can stand at her full height without bracing. Even your posture speaks. You move like a man who knows closeness is a gift, not a claim. You step aside to make space, sending the message that nearness is not a trap. In that geometry, she learns her gestures are not flaws to fix, but poems to be read. Your praise is not sugar, but sustenance. You notice edges. You name the color that turns her eyes into rest. You point out the courage in her story and give it wings. You call the callus on her hand elegant, because endurance is. You admire her left for never costing dignity. And in that mirror, she sees herself straighter, not for you, but for herself. Your noticing does not wait for curated moments. It arrives at the grocery store when you remember her stew. It arrives at the crosswalk when you take the side nearest traffic to bless the way. It arrives in the elevator when you see her plan ahead for others and tell her she thinks in shelter. She does not become ornamental under your gaze. She becomes inhabited. You look long enough to honor, short enough to leave space. She dances not for you, but because the floor is level at last. Even on unpolished days, when she is undone and unstyled, your eyes meet her like the sun finding a new way to be kind. You do not reward performance. You recognize essence. And in that recognition, she learns beauty is not a costume for applause, but a current that flows whether or not anyone claps. That knowing lands deeper than confidence. It awakens appetite. She wants more of herself. Sometimes your noticing protects her from splintering. When others turn her into a topic, you tilt the moment back to her voice. You ask questions that reveal her intelligence again. You show her that sensuality is not only skin, but mind offered and received. To be mentally admired is a touch, and in that touch her blood runs faster. Your restraint sharpens desire into atmosphere. You could devour, but you don't. You choose her agency over your appetite, and that choice becomes the air she breathes. In that air, her movements change, unperformed, natural, alive. Consent becomes conversation, where yes is music and no is honored cleanly. Even when you are gone, your gaze remains a mirror. She remembers the warmth in your eyes when she stumbled and recovered. The way you noticed her waist not for fabric, but for her decision to adore herself. She carries your pace when walking alone because it feels like her true rhythm. She reads the line you underlined and feels it underline her spirit. She enters rooms with your calm assumption that people are already good news, and others notice her as presence, not performance. Desire, she sees, is an ecosystem. You planted it with trust. It grows even in your absence, and yet your noticing also protects what is not ready for light. You see the grief beneath her joke, the fire in her defense, the ambition hidden under ease. You do not expose, you shield. Later, in private, you say gently, I saw. And in that confession, she is not uncovered, but cherished. Cherishing is fuel. It glimmers in places glitter cannot touch. What you see, you bless. And what you bless, she inhabits. Her voice sinks into truer notes. Her body softens without asking permission. Her movements stop negotiating. A plain shirt becomes sensual not for what it shows, but because the body inside it is free. A candle burns more brightly because of the way your eyes once traced her neck like a poem you did not rush to finish. Nights with you are not staged. They are seen. Even when she is adorned, you look as if for the first time. Your eyes circle her like a planet considering a moon, then land where her soul answers. The silence before you speak feels like a vow. She flushes with joy that has nothing to prove. She decides she is the sexiest version of herself she has ever been. And it is true because she decided it. And the next morning, when no one watches, she buttons her shirt and remembers your gaze like a field remembers rain. Strangers choose kindness around her without knowing why. She sees her reflection and does not edit it. She sends you a single word that somehow says everything. You read it and know your gaze has become her home. She, who is practiced in composure, finds that around you her poise is undone in the best way. She is a kite rediscovering wind. The string is still in her hand, but the sky has changed. Your masculinity does not roar. It arrives as decisions already made, as gravity that steadies the air. You take responsibility for the weight of your silence, for the weight of your words. You let quiet finish before you begin. None of it is theater, which is why it undoes her defenses. She begins to speak and discovers her tongue has chosen honesty instead of polish. She fumbles and laughs, and the laugh carries no apology. Around most men, forgetting feels like weakness. Around you, It feels like joy interrupting choreography, even in corridors. When you step aside with a raised hand, her ribs loosen, even at tables. When a sharp question bends her way, your stillness changes its shape. You do not swat, you angle, you do not dominate, you direct. She watches you, part student, part conspirator, and admiration warms her face in a way no cosmetic could.